Hello again. We as flute players have a lot of alternate fingerings that we can use, especially in the high register, and they can help us with pitch, tapers, other dynamics, general tone, all kinds of things. And I know that for myself, I was never handed this information in any organized way. And I think this is very normal for flute players, that I just occasionally have a teacher say, try this fingering on this note, it will help so that you don't go sharp, or that kind of thing. So today I want to give you all of the alternate fingerings in the high register that every flute player should know, and then I also want to give you some additional favorites of my own. If you have favorites, especially if they're ones that I don't mention, please leave them in the comments so that other people can see them. I'm sure other people would appreciate knowing what tricks you have. Also, while you're at it, please like and subscribe. The most common alternate fingerings we have in the high register really are mostly to bring pitch down because it's so easy to go sharp up there. So I'm going to start with high E and just wend my way up. For high E, the alternate fingering you should know to bring pitch down a little bit is finger your E, then take off your fourth finger, right hand fourth finger. This is something you should not do in lower octaves on E because those lower E's are some of the only notes that we really need that pinky down. Without it, it's a little flat, it's a little dull. That note loses some of its nice vibrancy. But in the high register, we might want it to be less brilliant sounding and a little bit flatter. So especially when I play an orchestra, I use this as more of my standard E fingering because it brings that pitch down a little bit. Going on to the F, we have a similar trick to bring pitch down a little, and that is we do what we call forking. So your left hand is normal high F fingering, thumb, first finger, third finger, and then your right hand, you have your first finger, you add your third finger, and you have your pinky down. And again, it will just bring the F down a little bit. One thing about this high F fingering is that it's great for aggressive articulations. If you're doing something staccato and short, especially accented, you'll hear a huge difference in pitch between fingering with the normal F fingering and adding this third finger. You can hear it's really quite a noticeable difference. Now for high F sharp, again, this is something we always say do not do in lower octaves. In lower octaves, people can get in the bad habit of fingering F sharp this way, so that when they go from an E, it's nice and simple, but that's a little flat, and it doesn't sound as nice as the real F sharp fingering. Well, in the high register, again, we likely want to bring pitch down on the F sharp, so you can finger the high F sharp this way, and it can really help with pitch on that F sharp. For high G, there's not really anything that's super standard, but if you want to bring it down pitch-wise, stick around, I'll come back to it. For high A flat, we can add your right hand second and third fingers. So finger your normal G sharp or A flat, add these two fingers. It gives you a lot more stability because you have more fingers down, and it also helps with pitch. Keep this fingering in mind, especially for playing the piccolo. Because if you think about playing a piccolo, we don't have all of these keys that are on our flute foot joint. The tube just ends there after the E flat. And the more you close the tube, the more stable it is. So if you have these fingers down at the end of your piccolo tube, it really adds stability to this A flat. And a lot of people playing piccolo use this as the standard A flat fingering. It's a little more complicated to get those fingers down, but it can be really nice and stable that way. For the high A fingering, there's not a really great standard alternate fingering, but you can again fork your right hand, add your third finger. It brings the pitch down very noticeably, and it makes the sound a little clunkier, a little cloudier. So I only do that when I really need to bring my A down significantly. You can hear it just loses, again, some of the brilliance in the sound, and the A is not quite as nice. One other thing I want to mention before we go on is high B flat. So many people learn this fingering wrong. Definitely a minority, but I would say I have a new student at least once a year who has learned this fingering wrong. And the way that people often learn it is you finger B flat like normal and then you add your first trill key. I think people are taught that in band just because it's a little simpler. It's almost the same as your low B flat. But the high B flat really should not have your left hand first finger down. And sometimes when I tell people this, it blows their minds because they've been playing high B flats this way their entire life. I had one new student say to me about a year ago that the reason she puts her first finger down is for pitch. Well, if you add that first finger, you'll hear that there's a little tone that creeps in that's a little bit lower tone, but the basic B flat pitch does not change at all. So it doesn't even help you with pitch. So I'm sorry to tell you, if you're used to playing B flat with this finger down, get used to playing with it off instead. Now we've made it through the most critical fingerings to know in the upper register, all these alternate fingerings that can help bring the pitch down, so congratulations! But there's still so much more that we could do. And I'm going to leave a lot of things out that I personally don't use as much, but one important category to always keep in mind is harmonics, and especially overblowing at a fifth rather than an octave, though you can use octave harmonic fingerings as well. But when I'm up in the high register, mostly I go from about the high E upward. By the time I get up to high E, if I wanted to overblow a harmonic and finger an A instead, that will bring the pitch down noticeably. Much more than just lifting my pinky. So as you get up into this high register and you want to bring pitch down, if you're really serious, like, wow, that is always so sharp, then you can overblow harmonics at the fifth. And the other thing is that it can make fingerings much easier. So back when I said we'll come back to high G and how to bring it down, if you overblow a C, instead of fingering a high G, you finger the C and overblow that, the pitch is again noticeably lower. So if you're just like, my high G, it's always so sharp, what do I do? Now you know, overblow the C and it will be much flatter. But also think about tricky high runs up in the high register. We often struggle with those because the fingerings are so complicated. And you don't want to like cheat too much and do it just for fingers, but if you need help with both fingerings and pitch, you can really gain a lot by overblowing harmonics. So for instance, if I had some run starting on a high G sharp, going down to an E flat or something, I could just overblow these lower fingerings starting on C sharp going down to A flat. That's obviously much easier than the real fingering. It just gives you a lot more facility. So if you're playing high runs in something like Lieberman Concerto, don't forget to examine harmonic fingerings if you're struggling up there, and especially if it feels sharp. Now I'm going to go the opposite direction and give you some fingerings that I like to use to bring pitch up in the high register, because say that you're playing very soft or you have to do a taper, we often don't have the stability up there, and so either the note sags and goes flat or it sags clear down an octave and cracks too low on us. So these are some fingerings to actually bring the pitch up a little bit and to add stability in the high register. So first of all, the C right above the staff. This one is just a little bit less stable because we only have one finger down. Most of the tube has a lot of open holes, which leads to instability. So one thing you can do if you need to play a really soft C and it tends to be flat and not stable is to finger your low C. So you have all these fingers down and then just lift your thumb off. And that will give you a nice stable and a little bit sharper C. So I can hang out on that C if I have all these fingers down and feel like it's going to stay in place. It feels very stable, very dependable. Same thing with the low C sharp. You can finger the low C sharp and take off your thumb and your first finger, and you'll get that C sharp with the same stability. You can also hear it is noticeably higher in pitch if I go from the real fingering to that other fingering. So if if you want to taper and you're afraid of going flat, that will keep you from going flat for sure. If that's just way too sharp for what you're looking for, you can also get stability on the C sharp by adding these two fingers, 2 and 3 on your left hand, and 2, 3, 4 on your right hand. You can tell that it's not nearly as sharp as when your finger is on the C sharp key, but it's still nice and stable and a little bit higher than just normal C sharp. So that's the one that I go to the most. I honestly don't use this one all that often, but if you're playing a high D, the D's tendency is to be flat. So if you're playing very softly and you're too flat on the D, you can add your left hand fourth finger and your right hand first finger, and that will bring the pitch up a little bit. And it's nice and stable, and then you don't have to struggle to lip that up and try to keep it from going flat. High E. Here's another great one for high E. You just have to be careful with this, especially if you don't have a split E key, but even if you do, you can use this. You can add your second trill key, but you have to barely crack it open. Don't push it all the way down, or we can tell a mile away what you're doing. It sounds very hollow. If I finger regular E and plunk this down, it's a very hollow E. But if you barely crack that trill key open, it can give you a lot of stability. That E will never go down to the A. It will never crack down the octave. It's very stable. For high F and F sharp and A, there's a great trick, and it works the best on F sharp. So for high F sharp, if you move your pinky off of this E flat key and put it instead on the C sharp key, that gives you a lot of stability and it brings up the pitch a little. This is great for when you have to taper a high F sharp. Let me show you the difference. So again, the pitch is a little bit higher. You'd never want to use this when you're playing an F sharp loudly, but when you're tapering and it might go flat, this will keep you very stable and it won't go flat. I'll let you hear on the F and the A that it also makes a difference. There's a good reason this helps. It's not magic or some kind of witchcraft. It's because if you move your finger off of this E flat key and you put it on the C sharp key, you're closing 2 holes towards the end of the tube, and it adds stability to your flute because, again, the more open holes you have, the less stability. It almost tricks your flute into thinking that's the end of the tube, and you have all these closed holes, especially on F sharp. All those closed holes are right in a row, and so it gives you a lot of stability there. One more I want to throw at you today, and then that's enough to absorb for now. A really good one for high B flat when you want to be soft and stable is to add your right hand third finger and take off the fourth finger. You can tell again it's very stable and you can be very soft with it. Another way that you can do that, if you have your thumb on the thumb B flat key, is to add these 2 fingers I mentioned, but take your first finger off. That works a little better. You just have to be sure your thumb's in the right place or it won't come out. So you can do it this way. Now for both of those, you don't want your pinky down. Having that pinky down just makes it so that it won't come out. Some of you may have thought about the fact that I'm playing a high F to a high B flat, and that's for a reason. That's because at the end of the Prokofiev Flute Sonata first movement, we have a very soft high F up to a high B flat, and a lot of people struggle to get that B flat to come out well. So if you do one of these fingerings, it'll work really well. You won't have to worry about that B flat coming out, and you can play as soft as you want. So take some time absorbing these different fingerings. Be sure you remember them. If you get to a tapering high F, be sure you think to yourself, yeah, I can use my C sharp key. For instance, the end of the Poulenc second movement, you end on a long sustained high F. It will make your life life so much better if you remember to move your pinky over. It'll be so reliable. So do whatever you can to keep track of all these fingerings and don't forget them in the course of your practice.